Good morning, I'm WaywornWyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome to episode 2 of Hoard of the Dragon Queen, Into the Tunnel. Governor Nighthill looked at them and tried to smile, but it quickly turned into a grimace. Thank you for agreeing to help. I'm pretty positive that the raiders down below are interested in loot and nothing more. I don't think they're going to mount a serious attack on the keep, nor do I think they will particularly go out of their way to attack the townspeople. That being said, getting the townspeople to safety in the keep is our first priority. It is about 9 in the evening now, and they're just getting the keep isolated. He paused a moment to glance skyward. I think all we have to do is make it through the night. No more, no less. Why don't you rest for about an hour, and then meet me again, and by that point, I should have the first mission for you set out. Uthal nods. Yes, that seems to be the best course of action. We were rather injured on the way down here. It would be good for us to regain our stamina before going out. With that, the first meeting with the governor ended as a guard stepped forward and led them into a smallish room in the walls of the keep. It was decently appointed, but the important thing was it was a space they could call their own for a moment and recuperate in relative safety. Tessely looked at each member of the group as they got settled into their places. We agreed to help these people, and I'm not suggesting we do otherwise. But the thing we need each to internalize is, in all probability, it will be a struggle for anyone here to survive the night, including ourselves. And in all probability, the town, and everyone who is not in this keep, will be a total loss. And that dragon above? It might just melt this keep to slag, if it so chooses. She paused for a moment as she saw the looks of horror and fear and uncertainty pass over almost everyone's face. Uthal, on the other hand, seemed, if anything, happier at the prospect her words were bringing up. I want that to be on the table, so we can stop and think about that. If we're to survive this night. Mara looked sternly at Tessely as she finished up. Tess, you'll scare the young ones overly much. I know you grew up in the gutter, and have seen much death in your time as a paladin. But that is just one possibility. And from where I'm sitting, an unlikely possibility at that. Tess's head lowered in acquiescence. If you say so, Mara. And with those words of finality, an uneasy quiet settled over the group that lasted most of the hour that they remained in the room. Finally, they were resummoned to Governor Nighthill's presence, who was still pacing on the parapet. This time he was accompanied by a dwarf with knotted and tangled, bright red hair. I have received reports that dozens of the townsfolk have barricaded themselves in the Temple of Chauntea. He pointed in the dark. You should be able to see the stone building there. As you can see, the raiders have been trying to burn down the structure, but to little success. And for good reason. The entire structure is made of stone. However, it appears that the raiders have brought up a battering ram, and it's only a matter of time before they break through the front door. I need you to rescue the townspeople before that happens. Garrett looked at the building in the distance and then down toward the front gate of the keep. "It looks like the cordon has been tightened. How are we going to leave here and get to the temple?" Nighthill smiled and motioned to the dwarf at his side. "This is my castellan, Escobart the Red, and I believe he can help with that." Escobart stepped forward and began in immediately. "There are 3 ways into and out of this keep. The first, and the main one, is the main gates, but clearly they're not an option at the moment. There's a sally port on the side, but that is also covered, and the raiders have made several small probing attacks against it already. The third way is a long, disused sewage tunnel in the bowels of the keep." He pulls out an almost comically large key ring and started quickly flipping through the myriad of keys in the ring before finally stopping at a specific iron one flecked with rust and pulling it off the key ring. "Here, this key should open the gate both on this side of the tunnel and its far end. We can have someone take you to the gate on this side, and from there you will traverse the tunnel, which will let you out at the stream you came through on your way here. This will be a great way to go in and out, and the raiders shouldn't know about it. It might be the main way that you enter the town for the rest of the night." Tess took the key and thanked the dwarf. "No point wasting any more time. Let's go," she said simply, and headed out toward the stairs down. A servant was called, and within a few minutes the group stood in front of an iron gate set into the floor of a wine cellar. With some trepidation, Tess slowly inserted the key and started moving it in the lock. It was clearly stiff, and took her a few more moments than is comfortable. But she managed to open the lock and pull the gate open. Uthal jumped down into the darkness below with no hesitation, and a splash rang out. "It's not bad down here. The water doesn't even come up to my knees." With plenty of looks and head shaking, the rest of the adventurers follow Uthal's lead and jump down into the sewage. It turned out to be a rather large tunnel, almost 10 feet in diameter, with an amount of water that could be dealt with. As Tess and Garrett lit torches, the number of webs in the tunnel was thrown into sharp relief, and they slowly began to trudge through the water, which is soon shown to be stagnant, and the water rather quickly dries up as they move away from what must be a small indent in the floor near the grate. But before they can get too far, a lot of squeaking can be heard as swarms of rats come out of the darkness toward the group. As the rats swarm out of the darkness, Morn steps forward and blasts the rats with flames, and the smell of burning hair fills the tunnel as the after-image of flame dies away. Uthal pulls his blades from their sheaths and rushes forward at the rats, and stooping he starts swinging at them, managing to slice a surprising number into bits. Tess follows Uthal's lead once again, and pulls out her great axe and swings it into the swarm of rats, the large sweep of her axe taking out several more. At this point, one of the 2 swarms appears to be almost dissipated. Quora casts a spell, finishing it by raising her hand in front of her and closing it into a fist. As she does so, a spectral, skeletal hand reaches up from the floor of the tunnel and grabs one of the rats in the almost dissipated swarm and closes around it before disappearing, and a lifeless rat corpse falls to the ground. Garrett rushes forward, the torch guttering in one hand for a second, stabbing the last remaining rats of the first swarm, and he watches as the other swarm scurries off into the darkness. "Well, that takes care of that," he says with a grin. The others look at him exasperated, but move on after they clean off their weapons. Finally, they reach the gate at the far end of the tunnel, and as promised, it's locked. Tess takes out the key and places it in the lock, and at first, nothing happens. After a few minutes of fiddling around with it and moving it in the keyhole a bit, she finally manages to get the key to catch and the lock to snap open. Considering how much rust and corrosion is on the gate, it opens almost silently, and that is when Tess notices something. A group of raiders in the stream slowly picking their way toward the tunnel. Tess quietly closes the grate and quickly douses her torch and motions for Garrett to do the same. "There's some raiders heading this way. It looks like 2 humans and 6 kobolds. What should we do?" With a gleam in his eye, Uthal suggests, "We should kill them." Mara rolls her eyes. "Of course you would think that." Garrett jumps in. "Actually, I think Flintfinder is onto something. If we kill them, then it should be easier to travel along the stream, and hopefully it'll be less likely for them to check it again. With the series of small skirmishes that are happening throughout the town, and the chaotic way the raiders seem to be acting, I think it's unlikely that it will be reported that they were killed in the stream, so we shouldn't have to worry about that." Cora looks at the group. "Let's wait for them to pass and then sally forth and take them from behind. It's our best option, and I think we each know it." The group waded several feet back into the tunnel, listening for the group of raiders, who, luckily, were not being very quiet, to pass. Once they had passed and had gone a little farther down, the group quietly snuck out of the tunnel and rushed the raiders from behind. Garrett started off combat by drawing his short sword and rushing up behind a kobold, jumping and landing sword first between its shoulder blades. The kobold sunk to the ground, laying in the water of the stream. Cora fires her light crossbow at one of the other kobolds, burying the bolt into the back of its neck, and it also falls down. Pulling out her greatsword, Tess charges the back of one of the humans in the group. She catches him in the left shoulder, and the strength of her swing has the sword leaving his body at his right hip. Mara rushes forward with her mace and shield at the ready and smashes one of the remaining kobolds, causing it to crumple. By this point, the remaining human and 3 kobolds are well aware of what's happening and are trying to form a defense against this ferocious assault. Uthal draws his blades. With his longsword, he cuts down the human as the human's trying to draw his scimitar. With his short sword, he ends the life of one of the kobolds. Mara shoots a mote of ice at one of the 2 remaining kobolds, turning it to ice. The last kobold drops its weapon and yips, "I surrender! Please, don't kill me! I surrender!" Uthal walks forward and shoves the kobold down to its knees, pulling out a pair of manacles he has. He slaps them on the creature's upper arms, where it's wide enough for the manacles to fit. He puts the tip of his short sword at the dragon creature's neck and says, "Either you'll tell us what you're doing here, or I will have a kobold head on a spike." The kobold looks down in abject terror and ever so slightly nods. We're here to loot. The dragon lady tells us to. We're working for the cult of the dragon." It looks to each of its captors, pleading with its eyes. Mara steps forward. "Okay, that's enough. Let's bring him back to the keep and let them decide what to do with him." The others quickly agree and make a quick and luckily uneventful trip back through the tunnel that they had just cleared and delivered the kobold to one of the guards at the keep, who graciously gave Uthal his manacles back. Then they traveled the tunnel for a third time, again uneventfully, and ended back at the stream. Sneaking down the creek one last time, the group is ready for anything, but it seemed like, for the moment, the creek was being ignored by the attackers, as there was no one around, at least as far as they could see. After several minutes of walking down the creek, they reach the nearest point of the creek to the temple, and they crawl up the bank and into the bushes near the temple. It was not a good sight that greeted them. At the front door of the temple, a group of 3 humans and 6 kobolds, with the humans using a ram against the front door. They spotted a second group apparently circling the temple in a revelous mob made up of 3 humans, 10 kobolds, and 2 large drakes. And a third group was clustered at the back door, made up of 2 humans and 6 kobolds. The group at the back door are trying to burn down the temple, but mostly they've just covered the area in smoke. And that is where we will leave our adventurers for the second time. Thank you so much for listening to Hoard of the Dragon Queen 2 Into the Tunnel. We'll have the next episode up in a few weeks. In fact, the next time an episode of Hoard of the Dragon Queen goes live, that should be my first week of 7 videos a week. So, 1 video a day. And remember to tune in on Thursday for the second episode of the Clone Wars. Thank you.